Apakah Indonesia bisa menjadi negara maju tanpa melakukan reindustrialisasi? EBG itu bagus bro, tapi eksekusinya itu yang harus lo benerin bro. Thank you very much the team for preparing this for me. Before I begin, I would like to introduce some very good friends. First, Tuan Rumah, Pak Erwin Suryadi. Thank you, Pak Erwin, for hosting this. So, from PLN, we have Pak Komisaris, newly appointed Komisaris. Congratulations, Pak Antoni. Antoni Leong. So, we have Pak Alex from Sandinomics. Thank you, Pak Alex. Has been helping with public policy input from our side. Also, Komisaris in the Krakatau Steel Group. And many of my good friends on the left, Pak Arif from Dubai Chambers, Pak Bambang from Dubai National Emirate National Bank of Dubai, and also Pak Virgo. Terima kasih. And friends, I see Pak Izan also coming in from SB Group, and many of the friends I cannot mention one by one, but I have to mention my collaborator, Pak Yuga Aden and Ben. He's a co-founder of Sandilogy and Friends of the Media. And also I would like to introduce somebody who's visiting all the way from Boston, Pak Panji. Anyway, so about 13 years ago, at that time, we were very close with the team at McKinsey, and I was at National Economic Council. We did this launching of the archipelago. And at that time, of course, we did it the old-fashioned way, with the president speaking, with the ministers attending. And 13 years later, today, I found this format probably more appealing to the Gen Zs. So when you have this archipelago report, and Michael Subrata, who's a son of Pak Simon, a very good friend of mine, brought this up, I said, why don't we do this again? So today, among just very close friends, we were doing this to basically echo some optimism into Indonesian economy. And how we increase that optimism is by increasing the productivity. And the reports highlighted that. There are many challenging situations appearing in the global economic sphere. There's a trade war. Oh man, I had to basically handle so many discussions on the tariff issues. The global economy slowed down. I was in Europe. We attended the summer Davos in Aix-en-Provence in southern France. It's such a heated argument, so much so that when we left the conference, it was bushfire in Marseille. It's so hot that it ignited a bushfire. So the airport had to be closed and everything. So I think from my experience from both government and business, the insights provided by McKinsey Global Institute really help us navigate. And this enterprising archipelago in particular has been very useful. So as we chart into the next phase, now Pak Prabowo is in his first year. We hope, digesting this report and making it like a storytelling. It's easy to digest, and with the data, with very simple solutions, we can take some key takeaways for us to move forward. So for the first takeaway is productivity. I think the engine that will drive Indonesian to high income status is not just the economic growth. Everybody was focusing 8%, 8%. That's good. But we could achieve that with productivity. Second is empowering micro, small, medium enterprises. This is music to my ear because this theme is from micro to mighty. A lot of emphasis will be really on this micro, small, medium enterprises because we have 64 million plus. So if we could bring them from micro to small, small to medium, medium to large, it's going to be able to drive a whole economic growth. And now there are a lot of issues with regards to jobs, availability of jobs. The one that could really generate good quality jobs is the micro, small, medium enterprise. Nothing wrong with big industries such as Krakatau and PLN. Nothing wrong with the banks or with the content creator. But from banks to big companies and everything, they are not the one that create jobs. The one that create good quality jobs is the micro, small, medium enterprises. Third point that I want to raise is regional productivity, which is going to move from disparity to balance. So more and more islands of excellence of productivity is going to be, I saw it firsthand when I created the tourism village and the creative economy village, that these people could really increase the productivity, and although they are so far from Jakarta. So this is something that we look at how this inequality, because when you look at East Nusa Tenggara, the GDP per capita is so small. It's actually Jakarta is 14 times the size of East Nusa Tenggara, and we could use, because they are in Labuan Bajo, and this is a super priority destinations. And lastly, the fourth one is the 5 productivity capitals, which is foundations for an enterprise in Indonesia. We talk about financial capital, human capital, institutional capital. We need to strengthen the institutions other than building the industrializations, infrastructures, but strengthening the institutional is very important. Infrastructure capital and entrepreneurial capital. So at the end, I'm going to basically start the sessions from you, and then we make it free flow. Is that all right with everybody? And we're going to open up for more questionings from the audience. So Kunti, I think this is a great collaborations, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Pak Sandi. Real pleasure to see you again. Pak Sandi, every time I see you, you look younger and younger, yeah? It's a exactly remote aging. Well, look, thank you for inviting us to this very special and very intimate event. It's an honor to speak about what it would take for Indonesia to move from a middle income to a high income economy. As we all know, Indonesia has a big aspiration to be high income by 2045. It's 20 years from now, but in a grand scheme and history of nations, 20 years, it goes by in a blink of an eye. So actually, it is very ambitious in 20 years. On top of that, in the short term, we want to accelerate the growth from 5% to 8% and even higher than 8%. So when MGI a year ago, as you mentioned, Pak Sandi, 12 years ago, we wrote the first report, and we decided to do a total refresh, given that Indonesia has actually grown very well over the past, I would say, 10, 15 years. The question now is, what will it take? What will it take for us to actually escape the dreaded middle income trap? And I must say, Pak Sandi, you have a very nice way of explaining all the terminologies that we use in this very dense report in very relatable language. So you make our life very easy now. And indeed, what we found was very interesting. First of all, we, of course, looked at other countries, right? Looked at countries based on the past 40 years, which have successfully grown from middle to high income. From where Indonesia is today, our GDP per capita is kurang lebih 5.000. 5.000 dan untuk menjadi high income has to be closer to 15.000 dolar ke atas. So we looked at all the countries. Of course, we didn't look at those which were already high income sejak zaman dahulu kala. So of course, we don't look at US, UK, parts of Europe, but we looked at the ones that are more recent because that is lebih kekinian. And we found that indeed there are countries that have been able to achieve high income from Indonesia is today in 20 years or less. A few countries, for example, Korea, China, Poland, Chile. So based on those benchmarks, we then went deeper and said, what was the secret sauce? What was the magic? Of course, there are different countries culturally and so on us, so we will have to find our Indonesian way. But what are some of the lessons that we can learn, that we can apply and maybe do it the Indonesian way as well? And we found a few very important insights from that. The first was that if we want to be high income, the structure of the economy needs to also shift. It needs to transform quite materially in terms of the firm's productivity and also the number of mid-sized and large firms in this country. You were alluding to earlier today, most of the jobs are actually being driven by micro and small firms, and nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's been the source of our resilience over multiple global crises. Right, Indonesia has been resilient thanks to the micro and small firms. But today, 4 in 5 workforce works in micro and small. But what we found is for high income economies, 1 in 2 of the works in micro small, but 1 in 2, the other half works in medium and large. What did this mean? What you said very nicely was we need to go from micro to mighty. We need to grow from the small to medium to large. We need to grow our micro SMEs. I think in some countries like China, they have a nice way, they call it little giants. We want to grow a lot of little giants. So here in Indonesia, maybe we want to grow the mighty, right? The micro to mighty. So that is one insight that we got. The second insight we got was in terms of driving productivity as well, it requires significant capital deepening. And in particular, when we say capital, we always think of, rupiah, dollars, and cents. And that is, of course, right. It's the first form, financial capital. But financial capital doesn't come or exist or accumulate in a vacuum. It comes when you actually create the right environment for investment to flow, domestic and also foreign. And so that's why we landed on 5 forms of capital. Financial capital, yes, but also we need to build up, secondly, human capital. Because for the economy to be more productive, workers must also be more productive, and we need more knowledge workers. And today, I think in Indonesia, I think only about 40% who have completed secondary school education. We need to get that to 80-90% according to benchmarks, or even up to 100% kalau bisa. And pasti bisa. But I think this is one of those human capital gaps that we need to fill if we are going to be high income. So that's second form of capital, human capital. The third form of capital is institutional capital. I think you have also been in government, in private sector. Sandy, you know very well that public-private sector collaboration and how we actually break through in terms of lower bureaucracy, more efficient, in terms of the processes and systems. That is very important. So institutional capital is also something that has to be built up over time to make it easier to foster larger businesses to grow, small businesses to become medium, and so on and so forth. So that's the third. The fourth is infrastructure capital. And I do think that here Indonesia has done an amazing job over the past, decade or 2 decades, right? The amount of tolls, ports, airports that have been built, it's truly amazing, transformational. We still have quite some ways to go, but we are getting there. And then now the next, of course, is digital infrastructure as well. So that's number 4. And then last but not least, of course, is the entrepreneurship in this economy, entrepreneurial capital, as we call it. How do we foster entrepreneurship so that there are more want to start up businesses, and if they do start up businesses, they also have the skills and ambition to grow these businesses, the little giants, as China calls them, right? And how do we actually people in the medium and large enterprises also behave as if they are still startups and still want to grow those businesses. So these are the 5 forms of capital that we landed on in the end, Pak Sandi. And so, basically the gist of the report is we want to be high income. It is not just the amount of growth, but the type of growth, productivity. And we need to increase significantly, number one. Number two, the most critical unit for productive growth is the firm, the enterprise. So that's why we call it the enterprising archipelago. And for firms to be productive, they must achieve minimum scale. Because if they are too small, it's not worth to invest into technology, to put more capital and so on. So that's why we need to triple the number of medium and large enterprises from micro to mighty. Number two. Number three, we also need to look into holistically all forms of capital, not just the financial capital, which is easy to measure, like how much investment and all, and we should continue to track how much investment we make, but also how we do all the other softer forms of capital. Jadi kurang lebih in a few minutes, hopefully that is summarizing the gist of the report. Thank you.
Pak Antoni, ada tambahan? You want to add anything?
Yeah, no, I think thank you, align with Kunti. So I think anyway, this is the report that is also close to my heart, right, about Indonesia. Maybe I do have 3 young kids at home. It's always my dream to actually to see them to grow and live in a high-income nation, right, in Indonesia. So I think this is the report that is really really critical, right? So I think when we look also like to Kunti's point, like when it comes to the capital deepening, right, it's very important to improve productivity. We do see the correlations into that, right? Then I think the question that we also try to answer actually, where should we deploy this capital, right? Because when we look at the structure of the firms, we also want to look at the sectors. I think one point that we want to highlight is actually, as Indonesia become more high income, like there'll be a bit of changes in the structure of the industry as well, right? Right now we are dominated by the service sectors, like 50-60%, right? It will actually becoming more and more important as we go forward. And this is not a hypothetical question. We do look at this in the data, right? We look at the number of economies in the world. As they become more mature, here at the top left chart, right? Actually, like we do expect that the service sectors actually will play a bigger and bigger role, right? However, it's also important to note here, right? Maybe here, like there are 4 sectors that we're looking. There's the agriculture, services, manufacturing, and resources. Services is the top right? So that's why when we look at the capital, it's really important to see like these are the sector that is already big in Indonesia. How do we ensure like the productivity increase through formalization of the employment, right? Because for example, right now, like Goto actually is a very good example, right? Because we do have like a lot of like a Gojek driver, right? Before Ojek, sekarang actually we digitize them, then they are becoming more productive, right? Because they can get more customers per day and so on and so forth, right? So these are like the areas that we are looking at, right? This is becoming more critical. And also important to note, if you look at this chart, like yang paling atas kiri itu kan agriculture. Yes, we do see that the contribution of agriculture sector will be declining as with other countries, right? But it's also important to note as the output of agriculture will still be higher if you look at Indonesia as a high income, right? So that's why it's important gimana kita ensure farmer kita punya mechanization, right? Gimana mereka punya access to the capital sehingga mereka nggak rely to the loan shark. Karena actually we as McKinsey actually we did one of the study also ketika kita ingin improve productivity untuk rice farmer kita. Dari segi misalnya kayak padi yang diproduksi per hektar, right? One of the insight that we look actually sebenarnya financial access is actually very critical. Jadi mereka belum ada akses banyak terhadap formal financial. Jadi masih rely ke misalnya tengkulak dan sebagainya yang actually reduce their productivity, right? And I think manufacturing again this is actually a very important sector for our country, right? This is an area that we actually have to detect the leap, right? Di mana manufacturing kita pengen langsung masuk ke advanced manufacturing, di mana actually we do have a lot of like kind of like a kelebihan lah di sana, right? And I think resources, if you look at here, of course like maybe like as any country grows, typically resourcesnya nggak terlalu berubah, karena kan tergantung endowment atau natural resources untuk setiap country. But then the question like how do we also ensure that the resources itu Indonesia can harness the current changes that we see, di mana kita sekarang natural resources kita very endowed, gimana kita capitalize on those kind of like sekarang yang kayak new renewable energy, right, that requires let's say like a lithium, dan sebagainya. So I think that's one area that I want to highlight. Yeah. And maybe Indi want to add anything.
Oke, thank you so much. Tepuk tangan dong buat Pak Antoni. Silakan Indi.
Thank you, Pak. Mungkin yang bakal saya tambahin itu adalah terkait how do we move from the aspiration to action gitu kan. Mungkin selama ini kita udah sering dengar tadi ada target jadi high income, mau grow 8%, tapi sebenarnya gimana caranya untuk bisa ke sana, dan that's why we came up with the 5 capitals gitu. Jadi salah satu hal yang kita bilang penting adalah sebenarnya monitoring dari indikator-indikator yang nggak cuma top line-nya doang gitu. Jadi mungkin orang fokus ke GDP growth-nya berapa, employment-nya berapa, tapi banyak metrik-metrik lain di bawah yang juga perlu dimonitor dalam 20 tahun ke depan. Jadi dari 5 capital ini yang tadi Kunti udah ceritakan, jadi contohnya di financial capital. How do we make sure that the money, even though informal employment itu banyak banget, actually gets reinvested gitu in the economy. Dan juga Indonesia bisa pakai long term financial instruments. Jadi contohnya pension assets itu sekarang baru 2% dari GDP. Insurance itu baru 5% dari GDP. Jadi masih kecil sekali dibandingin sama negara-negara lain. Terus kemudian kedua adalah human capital. Jadi salah satu hal yang kita found dari report ini adalah dari unemployment di Indonesia, 60% itu adalah dari lulusan vokasi dan lulusan university. Jadi unemployment itu sekarang kebanyakan bukan dari yang tidak berpendidikan, tapi justru malah dari yang berpendidikan. Jadi makanya kita bilang yang perlu dimonitor adalah lulusan SMA ke atas itu berapa banyak. Sekarang itu baru 40% gitu. Terus yang ketiga adalah institutional capital. Jadi sebagai indikator dari government efficiency gitu. Kita lihat ada misalnya kalau mau lihat roadmap untuk digital strategy. Sekarang ini di government ada 20 strategi yang berbeda gitu. Terus outcome-nya gimana? Kita lihat dari biaya untuk mulai bisnis baru sama berapa lama kalau orang mau buat bisnis baru. Ini di Indonesia sekarang sampai $1.300, perbandingannya di Singapura hanya $30. Untuk buka bisnis butuh 40 hari. Gitu. Jadi ini jauh lebih, mungkin masih bisa diefisiensikan lebih gitu ya. Keempat adalah infrastruktur capital. Jadi kita lihat kalau provinsi paling kaya di Indonesia, Jakarta, sama provinsi yang GDP kapita paling rendah, itu NTT, bedanya 14 kali. Sementara kalau misalnya di Cina, itu kurang lebih 4-5 kali doang. Nah, jadi ini kenapa infrastruktur masih dibutuhkan, karena kalau misalnya satu daerah doang gitu yang berkembang, tapi yang di daerah lain gak berkembang, jadi mahal di sananya gitu. Kemudian yang terakhir adalah entrepreneurial capital. Jadi kita dari tadi bilang gimana caranya untuk micro jadi ke small, small ke medium, medium ke large. Nah, ini tetap perlu ada new businesses to grow, dan lebih pentingnya formal business gitu. Karena jangan sampai orang buat bisnis baru, jualan warung, tapi ya udah stay sebagai informal business terus gitu. Jadi itu adalah beberapa metrik yang kita lihat bisa ke depannya untuk dimonitor. Ini ilustratif, nggak exhaustive, masih banyak metrik-metrik lain yang sama pentingnya, tapi ini beberapa indikator yang kita lihat kalau high income economy itu perlu ditingkatkan. Mungkin gitu.
Tepuk tangan dong buat Mbak Indi. Well done. Saya tuh banyak dikritik waktu 2019 karena Pak Prabowo itu kan call sign-nya itu 08. Dikenalnya sebagai 08. Jadi waktu itu berapa target pertumbuhan kita? 8% gitu loh. Itu merely simbolik, tapi juga penyemangat kita gitu untuk mencapai ke sana. Ternyata di report ini kita bisa tumbuh 5,4% dan menjadi high income country selama productivity-nya tercapai. Jadi itu ini yang membuat banyak pihak mungkin nggak bisa terlalu nyinyir lagi gitu loh, bahwa kita nggak akan bisa maju lah nyampe ke Indonesia emas kalau pertumbuhannya itu kayak begini-begini aja. Nah kita sekarang kan ada di 4,9, 5.4 itu sebetulnya bisa tercapai. Jadi salah satu hal tadi yang kita ngomong, misalnya market itu is too narrow and too shallow. Karena tadi pensiun cuman dana pensiun cuman 2%, insurance cuman di bawah 5% dan lain sebagainya. Sementara kita ngelihat India, tadi pagi saya gantian WA-WAan sama Pak Alex. India ini sudah berapa persen Pak untuk stock marketnya dari GDP? Di atas 100%. Kita masih 50%. Nah ini PR banget, habis sekaligus juga peluang buat kita ke depan, how we could deepen, widen, and strengthening our capital market. Misalnya itu salah satu ya. Jadi terus di pengalaman saya juga, a long report kayak gini itu, although enak banget dibacanya gitu ya, tapi orang Indonesia, nggak semua orang Indonesia lah, nggak suka baca Pak. Dia sukanya baca headline aja gitu loh. Terus sama baca social media tuh kita hebat gitu loh. Broadcast gitu, jago gitu ya. Bener ya Pak Arif ya? Nah oleh karena itu saya bikin kayak gini nanti supaya nanti statementnya Indi, statementnya ini bisa kita klip. Kita bisa klip terus kita bisa sambungin sama. Jadi dulu dibilang gini, wah Sandi ini paling jago tuh nge-dumb down a very complex language to dumbing down. Kalau yang pinter kayak Mbak Nona sih, ini lulusan English nih. Jadi ngerti, tapi banyak sekali yang terbantukan kalau kita bisa klip dan bisa kita, misalnya certain fact yang menurut saya catat dari sini nanti untuk kita diskusi juga adalah naik kelas nih. Jadi dari mikro ke small. Ini kita ngomongin terus-terusan di HIPMI nih. Wah, tapi ternyata datanya di sini guys, bahwa kita perlu ningkatin yang medium size ya, dari 66.000 enterprise ke 200.000. Jadi 3 kali lipat. Ini mesti kita naikkan dalam waktu yang singkat. Terus yang large company, sekarang kita hanya punya dari 64 juta itu cuma 14.000. Ini harus dinaikin ke 40.000. Jadi juga 3 kali lipat. Nah ini kerjanya tuh kerja transformatif. Dan gak bisa, ini harus sistemik, gak bisa ad hoc gitu loh. Nah ini orkestrasinya mesti di the top leader. Juga yang saya menarik di dalam pembicaraan ini adalah peran daripada UMKM sebagai pencipta 97% dari lapangan kerja kita. Bagaimana caranya dia ini juga bukan hanya jalan di tempat gitu. Tadi saya bilang mereka tuh jangan cuman survive, ada di titik satu aja terus. Tapi mereka naik kelas. Salah satu yang contoh naik kelas yang luar biasa tuh misalnya kayak Pak Bahlil. Pak Bahlil Lahadalia ini waktu saya pertama ketemu dia Pak, itu benar-benar usaha kecil Pak. Masuknya klasifikasi usaha kecil, tapi dalam waktu 10 tahun dia bisa loncat sampai menjadi usaha besar dan sekarang the sky is the limit, dia sekarang menjadi menteri. Jadi percepatan gitu, tapi itu cuma 1, 2. Ini kita perlu 66.000 jadi 200.000. Ini PR juga. Berarti itu harus ada kolaborasi lintas sektor. Bukan hanya tugas pemerintah, bukan hanya tugas dunia usaha, tapi tugas kita semua. And finally, banyak yang bilang we need money. We need money. Saya sering dengar Pak Prabowo bilang we need money. Betul, we need money. Tapi ternyata money not enough. Kita perlu more than money. Kita perlu yang tadi, semua udah digaris bawahi. Tapi yang paling sedih, ini adalah entrepreneurial capital. Kita pikir orang Indonesia itu sangat entrepreneurial, betul sangat entrepreneurial. Tapi dilihat dari new business density-nya, dibanding Brazil tuh 5, kita 0,3. Jauh banget guys. Jadi sebagai negara yang akan insya Allah menjadi Indonesia emas, amin. Kita harus hargai nih, tepuk tangan dulu buat McKinsey Global Institute. This is not just a wake up call menurut saya, tapi this is a call for action. Jadi tadi yang dibilang bahwa aspirations harus turns into real actions. Nah oleh karena itu saya mengundang Bapak Ibu untuk memberikan tanggapan, masukan, atau kalau ada pertanyaan, silahkan.
Such a great insight. So I think I'm just gonna introduce myself. Aku Teresa. Aku tech content creator and also an entrepreneur in the Web3 space. So this is more of a question actually. So I noticed that from the presentation, there's some countries that have achieved high income in less than 2 years or within the 20 years, less than 20 years, right? There's Korea, China, Poland, Chile, and so on. So from the research or from the based on like the experience of these countries, how can we, Indonesia, mimic or mirror the emerging market countries that has make it from educating the human capital? I do want to garis bawahin human capital because I think from like a content creator perspective, there's a lot of ideas or even concerns coming up from the human capital because they're actually educated, but there's a lot of layoff happening. There's also people trying to internship instead of just like towards the corporate or capital that is currently needed from the medium enterprises. So how do we mimic that, and how do we also churn from the 60%, which is the vocation and institution, towards the job market, and how do we bridge that essentially? So that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Great question. And I also feel the same about human capital, being one of the most important five forms of capital. So what can Indonesia learn dari beberapa negara yang memang sudah berhasil sampai ke high income in the shortest possible time? I think one of the big learnings we had is the follow through on the business investment climate, for lack of a better word. Basically, looking into sectors where the country has some advantage, whether it's a natural advantage or just because they have a talent pool or a market for that, and then they double down. And I know Indonesia has actually done quite well in this downstreaming policies, for example, in nickel, right? And has done very well to go downstream. But one thing that we also see very interesting in other countries is they also go upstreaming by going very far down into very specific end customer end markets. For example, going into consumer electronics. So, for example, some of these countries would look into how can we manufacture more consumer electronics? What kind of policies can we do in order to make it easier for some of these large manufacturers to set up base, and then they go upstream to reverse backwards into lithium ion or nickel or tin and so on. So actually, Indonesia has already gone quite well, and I think we are maybe halfway there. Now the other half is also looking into specific end sectors and saying whether it's renewables, whether it is electric vehicles, automotive sector, consumer electronics, where can we actually become a global powerhouse? So this is one learning from many of these countries. The second one is also very, very strong public sector and private sector collaboration to resolve all the specific issues related to every form of capital. You mentioned about human capital. For example, when Malaysia, doesn't have as much natural resources as Indonesia, for example. But 20, 30 years ago, it looked across the world and said that, look, we dream of becoming a semiconductor hub. And that's, if you think about it, why should Malaysia become a semiconductor hub? But basically, what the government did was say, we're going to attract, the first 8, foreign investors. We guarantee that we will provide the talent pool for you, but you have to train them. So you have to promise that you will train up our people. We'll partner with our local university, local institutes, and we will basically prepare the workforce to go to your factories and work there. And so this is, an example of public and private sector collaboration. And oh, by the way, in the beginning mungkin local contentnya belum terlalu tinggi kecuali labor, tapi lama-lama dinaikkan, right? And eventually they created the SMEs that are also supplying into these giant factories to do whether it is testing equipment or some other types of assembly manufacturing. They actually provide the services to them as well. So this is also an example of public-private sector collaboration that works. So that's I think a second important lesson. The third is, I think, and something close to Pak Sandi or Hud, is a extensive focus on micro and SME, and how can we actually help entrepreneurs to actually access bigger market. Jadi nggak di satu tempat doang, tapi how can we actually connect you to a wider market. And Indonesia, of course, is already sizable, but think not just Indonesia, but regional, and not just regional, but even global. How can, a supplier going through Alibaba in China also go out of China to supply other countries? Similarly, for us, we should also be able to access other countries, right, and grow our micro SMEs. So I think some of these are lessons that we have seen from other countries that made the journey. Mungkin mau ditambah?
Okay.
Oke, saya nambah aja. Tadi kan konten kreator. I suggest you watch the Super Cool Band series. Konten kreatornya ini, dan sekarang ini kan challengesnya gimana kita nyampein informasi yang berguna tapi juga harus entertaining, karena kalau nggak entertaining nggak ada yang ngeliat gitu. Nah, dari 4 negara tadi, jadi kan apakah dulu waktu kita deliberasi, waktu Archipelago report yang pertama itu, apakah Indonesia bisa menjadi negara maju tanpa melakukan reindustrialisasi? Karena kemarin itu terjadi deindustrialisasi. Ada yang berpendapat nggak usah, kita loncat aja ekonomi kreatif, content creating dan lain sebagainya. Karena saya portfolionya ekonomi kreatif selama 5 tahun, saya melihat itu gak bisa. Kita harus betul-betul memang melihat, tapi what type of industry. Jadi ada 4 negara tadi kan. Pertama China, gak usah diceritain lah what happened. Kedua Korea, ini ada creative economy partnya. Dia nomor 2 di dunia, Indonesia nomor 3. Tapi ada yang mengenable creative economy di Korea, yaitu dia punya semiconductor, dia punya consumer electronics, dia ada Samsung, terus udah gitu dia invest gede-gedean di layar di mana-mana. Jadi ada dampak daripada industrialisasinya. Terus Poland ini unik banget. Pak Alex mesti ke sana, Pak. Saya ke Gdansk. Di Gdansk itu ada 2 jam dari Gdansk itu ada satu village. Itu village itu kayak kita masuk, itu kayak Bali, Pak. Kayak Bali, ada 300 hektar, pura-pura di mana-mana. Tapi yang menariknya, mereka melakukan gamifications. Jadi a lot of the industri teknologi itu nggak berhenti di situ, tapi mereka is so ahead in gaming. Jadi saya kaget gitu loh. Padahal bukan di Warsaw, bukan di kota besar kayak Gdansk, ini 2 jam dari sana, tapi sudah yang salah satu poin di sini ini adalah regional productivity itu jalan juga di sana di Poland. Terus kita lihat Korea, Poland, dan terakhir tadi Chile ya. Chile saya belum pernah ke sana, Pak. Pengen ke sana, tapi pengen ngelihat. Tapi di dekat Chile ada cerita mengenai the powerful economy of very developed nations 50-60 years ago, yaitu Argentina yang sekarang struggling to stay in the G20. Itu juga kita mesti pelajari. Kenapa itu? Dia dari nomor 2 sampai nomor 3. Betul sekali Pak Bambang. Jadi kebijakannya tuh populis. Mohon maaf Pak Antoni Leong. MBG included. MBG itu bagus bro. Tapi eksekusinya itu yang harus lu benerin bro. Bagus itu idenya Pak. Live streaming. Mainkan. Bagus, tapi eksekusinya itu butuh UMKM diperkuat, bukan top down gitu. Kopdes bagus juga bro, tapi eksekusinya bukan top down. Ini sekaligus policy advocating, karena he's in the government now. I can speak like this because I'm outside the government. Enaknya emang gak jadi menteri itu emang enak bisa kritik. Eh, Tapi ini kritik yang membangun, bro. Jadi itu. Jadi ide-idenya Pak Prabowo yang kelihatan wah terlalu populis itu selama eksekusinya kita bisa membawa dampak yang tadi sesuai dengan ini akan baik.
Ada. So maybe I start and then Indi boleh nambahin. Yeah. Law and Order is like that, whatever sitcom ya yang setiap minggu dulu keluar mungkin 20 tahun yang lalu, but it's a great show, and I think it is the right point. It is as one of the 5 forms of capital tadi kita bicara tentang institutional capital. Sebenarnya translasinya is indeed law and order. Maybe that's the easier one to mention. And what we mean by institutional capital di sini adalah how do the institutions of the country, both in the public sector tapi juga on the private sector, the chambers of commerce, actually foster an environment where it is actually easy for people to set up businesses, to grow businesses. So questions that we should ask are, for example, how long does it take for you to get all the permits, right? All the licenses. How many times do you have to go back and forth to different offices, not just at the national federal level, tapi juga in the local provincial level. And if it is too complicated, yeah, after 1 year kan, investors, especially from outside, get too tired. And then they say, well, if I spend 1 year in Indonesia, what can I do versus I spend 1 year in any other country, like for example Vietnam or any other country, right? And they say, oh, kalau gitu ya, and time is money for many of these, business people because every year they wait, right? They are delaying, and they might be losing opportunities. So I think that institutional capital indeed comes down to and law and order, of course, basic law and order must be there lah, right? Must be there. Tapi the next level is more advanced law and order is how efficient do you make it? And even more advanced than that is catalyzing. Do we have the institution yang bisa mengkoordinasi? Karena yes, it's okay of course big countries need big government. That is by default, right? Smaller countries maybe need smaller government, but a big country like Indonesia needs a bigger government. But how do we coordinate among the different ministries, among the different regulators in order for a business to make it easy? And it's not enough for us to just say, okay, silakan Bapak Ibu nanti dari sini ke sana, dari sana ke sana lagi, dan kemudian kembali ke sini lagi dalam 45 hari. It doesn't work that way. But how can we actually say, okay, can we institutionally cut through the red tape? Can we actually see through, like instead of 3 steps, let's make it in 1 step, satu pintu dan segala macam. So I think that is exactly the point on institutional capital.
Another part of institutional capital itu the consistency of changes in regulations di Indonesia. Pas kita buat report ini, kita juga sempat interview beberapa perusahaan di Indonesia, dan salah satu pain pointnya mereka adalah ganti-ganti terus gitu regulasinya. Jadi satu itu misalnya ngomong apa, ntar 6 bulan ke depan ganti lagi gitu. Implikasinya satu, kalau misalnya ada perusahaan luar mau masuk, mereka jadi nggak ada trust di Indonesia. Dan juga yang kedua, buat perusahaan kecil itu lebih susah. Karena kalau misalnya perusahaan besar, mereka punya resourcesnya, punya tim legal dan lain-lain buat memitigasi perubahan-perubahan ini. Tapi kalau misalnya di perusahaan kecil, mereka jadi udah nyerah duluan gitu. Ya mendingan saya jadi tetap informal aja daripada saya formal harus bayar ini itu, ntar ganti lagi peraturannya gitu. Jadi itu juga yang salah satu kita lihat, satu inconsistency di regulationsnya atau changes di regulationsnya. 2 adalah stakeholders Pak. Jadi tadi contoh yang saya kasih satu adalah digital strategy roadmap, itu sekarang ada 20 di kementerian yang berbeda, di asosiasi yang berbeda gitu. So how do we make sure that aligning between stakeholders itu juga salah satu hal yang penting gitu.
Jadi sebenarnya ketika kita desain 5 capital itu benar Pak. Jadi its capital ini is important but cannot exist on its own. Jadi sebenarnya the power lies in the release of the 5 capital. Karena kalau misalnya satu nggak jalan bakal jomplang. Misalnya saya kasih contoh. Yang Bapak tadi actually raise a very good point, right? Kalau kita udah ada financial capital, cuma ternyata institutional capitalnya nggak jalan, then berarti the money that is put, right, then basically is not put into a system that is productive, gitu kan. Sama misalnya kalau saya lihat human capital, right, dengan adanya program misalnya untuk increase our health buat orang kita dan more skillful, if the entrepreneur capitalnya itu juga nggak ada, then it will lead to under employment gitu. Jadi 5 capital ini actually is very very important gitu. Kalau saya analoginya 5 capital ini tiap komponen penting. Financial capital itu kayak fuel, kayak gimana kita supaya actually like mobilize the money. Human capital actually is the engine, right, to run that machine, right. Institutional capital yang kayak Bapak bilang kayak kalau saya lihatnya rule book gitu atau law and order, right, without that nggak bakal jalan juga mesinnya kan. Infra capital of course the backbone lah kayak jalannya, of course without jalanan nggak bakal jalan juga kan, mau kemana. Dan entrepreneur capital ya the spark lah, if you're talking about engine, mungkin saya pakai analogi a bit of like Kunti, saya mechanical engineer, like that's how I look at this. Without any of this component nggak bakal jalan sih. That's why when we look at this, we want to measure 5-5-nya gitu, jadi bukan satu doang, karena satu doang nggak bakal jalan. Thank you.
Thank you, tepuk tangan. Memang sebelum ke Pak Alex ya, tadi commenting on the law and order itu selalunya, nah gini, ini juga buat Anthony, karena dia jubir pemenangan Pak Prabowo Gibran. Pemerintahan ini di-vote by the people as a continuity government dengan konsep keberlanjutan. Karena ada 2 hal di dalam setiap election itu adalah change or continuity. It's simple. Di elections 2024 yang lalu, kita semua, mungkin ada yang enggak, tapi yang memilih Pak Prabowo itu equals continuations, keberlanjutan, betul? Change itu direpresent oleh siapa? Anies. Tapi pada intinya itulah continuity and change. Namun setelah terjadi, banyak pengusaha yang bertanya sama saya nih, Pak Bambang, katanya continuity, kok banyak yang berubah ya? Akhirnya idiom ganti pemerintahan, ganti kebijakan, ganti menteri, ganti priority. Itu bukan pantun ya. Tapi rhyme ya, ganti pemerintahan, ganti kebijakan, ganti menteri, ganti priority. Ini yang terjadi dan akhirnya that institutional capital nggak bisa jalan bro. Sama juga lagi main bola, gawangnya dipindah. Coba kita lagi nyerang ke bagian utara, tiba-tiba gawangnya dipindah ke barat. Gitu. Demikian.
Thank you very much, Pak Alex, for the question. So, yeah, I think indeed kalau kita bicara over the next 20 years, yes, I mean the world will be very, I think we can certainly agree kalau the world will definitely be a very different place, and even the workforce that we have, right, the jobs that we have today and the jobs that we have tomorrow, I think they are going to be shifting. And I think we did a report about 3-4 years ago about the impact of automation and AI on the global economy. Yeah, that's right, Pak Sandi. Yeah, just around COVID time. And I think one of the things that we noted was actually, yes, there are going to be jobs lost as a result of adoption of technology. Exactly. But then we also looked at the jobs gain, because when we automate, we need somebody to actually maintain or design, maintain, service this automation or these machines and so on and so forth, these higher, more advanced machines. And so what we discovered was very surprising, that job loss, and we call it job gain, actually there's a net job creation in the global economy. Then we got a question, kalau di Indonesia gimana? Mungkin nggak nanti semua malah jobnya loss dari Indonesia, gainnya malah di mana-mana, di negara yang lain. But actually what we found was that even for Indonesia as well, there's actually going to be net gain. The issue for us is how do we skill up our workforce, our human capital, to be ready to receive, to be prepared for those jobs. Kalau tidak, ya memang akan hilang dari kita dan keluar ke tempat yang lain. But there is a potential. And when I look at, of course, one thing is sad to say, 40%, have graduated from high school dari sini. But what that tells me is that imagine if that 40 became 80 or 90 or 100%. what that means is that the talent pool is almost like, we haven't fully unleashed the full power of Indonesia's human capital yet in order to take advantage of the net job gain that is supposed to come. And so what I think will likely need to happen in the next few years is that we actually are making a big push also on ensuring from the youngest children we have today to the ones in the primary and lower secondary school, they are all being prepared in order for them to actually become future knowledge workers. The manufacturing jobs, there will be less of the old traditional manufacturing jobs. By definition, when they are more productive, per unit of output, pasti inputnya kurang. But then, there's a different kind of input, which is not directly measured in the factory worker, which is people who are actually maintaining, servicing this machinery. They are indirect labor, but they are no less important. And potential is probably higher paying jobs as well. So I think maybe that's a bit of the sense of where the jobs are going, higher knowledge, more advanced jobs, but we need to be prepared creating those and reskilling our workforce to be prepared for those. Mungkin itu kurang lebih pandangan dari McKinsey ya. Kalau mau ditambah.
Sure, mungkin aku ngelihatnya dari karena ini salah satu hal yang kita lihat juga Pak di report ini adalah dari macam-macam sektornya gitu. Jadi mungkin satu contohnya di agriculture. Kita lihat kalau misalnya negara semakin kaya, itu jumlah orang yang bekerja di sektor agriculture itu justru makin turun. Tapi kita in no way saying that the output dari sektor agriculture itu bakal turun. Justru malah dengan orangnya berkurang, outputnya harus makin besar. Jadi productivity-nya harus lebih tinggi lagi. Productivity-nya itu dari mana? Misalnya ada teknologi baru, harus belajar nih cara make kalau ada teknologi barunya seperti apa gitu. Jadi itu satu contoh gitu di sektor agriculture, di sektor agriculture sendiri productivity harus meningkat. Jadi skillnya harus reskilling lagi gitu. Kalau misalnya ada orang keluar dari sektor agriculture, dia masuknya kemana? Ke sektor manufacturing atau masuk ke sektor services gitu. Kalau dia masuk ke manufacturing yang baru, itu kan sesuatu yang harus dia belajar lagi gitu kan, karena it's not something that semuanya bisa lakukan gitu. Itu lagi reskilling lagi di sana. Atau kalau misalnya masuk services, tergantung dia mau jualan di warung doang atau dia mau masuk kerja di bank gitu. Itu kan dua hal yang berbeda juga gitu. Jadi tadi yang related tuh yang Kunti mention gitu, ada jobs gain-nya juga, tapi yang penting adalah apakah orang-orang itu punya kapabilitas untuk bisa kerja di sektor-sektor tersebut gitu.
Thank you. Boleh saya respon sedikit ya Pak? Maybe just a glance of optimism from private sector ya. Jadi mungkin sebagian tadi kita used to criticize government and the policy, but I see myself dari tadi kan tell me Virgo. Virgo is my nama yang lama itu from old economy. Now my name is William Saputra from the new economy. Kalau Virgo old money, William Saputra new economy. Nah terus kalau sedikit cerita
Cepet aja, kalau dulu zaman-zaman saya sama Pak Sandi, bacanya Bobo. Kalau sekarang anak-anak belasan tahun, 20 tahun, cita-citanya jadi Goldi Saputra.
Jadi kalau nanya
nama benernya Ben, tapi nama di konten ini Bobby Saputra.
iya,
We're gonna make something with Bobo and Bovi. Iya,
iya. Terus kenapa saya cerita soal itu? Salah satunya our new company movie ya. Itu bulan lalu di Cannes Festival we actually won the best fully generated AI movie dari Indonesia. Jadi bisa lihat YouTube Vision Nusantara itu ceritanya tentang Gajah Mada. Jadi itu fully generated dari suaranya, mukanya, storyline-nya itu fully generated AI. Dan kedua, setelah dari sana kita juga memang buat AI Academy. Nah sekarang kita udah punya sekitar 2000-an engineer AI, bahkan dari seluruh dunia walaupun majority dari Indonesia. Karena AI ini ke depan challenge-nya itu ada di human. Dan kalau kita realize sebenarnya, saya udah ketemu banyak banget orang asing di Jakarta. Orang pikir orang asing tuh banyak kan tinggalnya di Bali aja. Sekarang di Jakarta juga banyak sekali, bahkan orang-orang Hollywood nih, yang udah banget, kalau saya sebutin namanya pasti pada tahu, mereka bukan cuma visit di sini, bahkan udah mulai pindah. Dan gak cuma Bali, bahkan ke Jakarta. Baru aja kemarin 2 hari yang lalu, saya meeting di Blok M tuh isinya American semua. Kalau lihat Russian, saya punya ada company Russian luar biasa gitu ya. Tapi ini full American people pindah ke sini, pindah ke Blok M dengan launch IP company gitu. Jadi kenapa mereka ke sini? Karena Indonesia itu ekonomi tinggi. Ya, ternyata nggak cuman pinter, mungkin kalau pinter volume ya juga oke. Ternyata di sini juga punya itu gitu. Jadi kayak kita punya akademi dari zero pengetahuan tentang AI dalam 2 minggu mereka bisa. Dan setelah jadi engineer dalam waktu 2 minggu itu mereka udah bisa buat sendiri dan bahkan itu memenuhi kebutuhan kita untuk engineer-nya gitu. Jadi saya lihat selain AI, kedua juga dari mulai medical services, terus juga digital engineer mungkin udah lama ya. Kalau kita tahu dari 20 tahun lalu, arsitek-arsitek terkenal buat project-project di Dubai, di New York gitu, yang ngetop namanya mereka. Tapi kalau dilihat yang renderingnya siapa? Beberapa tuh orang Indonesia, arsitek-arsitek Indonesia, engineer Indonesia ya, yang ngerender detailnya gitu. Tapi orang kita kalah di marketingnya, dibangun namanya, brandingnya. Tapi orang-orang kita nggak kalah sama sekali di skillnya sebetulnya. Jadi saya lihat ke depan malah dengan yang saya jalanin selama setahun ini di social media, di bisnis. Karena mungkin influencer yang paling tua mungkin sekarang saya kali ya selain Pak Sandi ya. I don't consider myself a content creator actually, it's just a vehicle kan. Karena Bobby sering-sering narik saya, jadi saya di-consider sekarang orang ngeliatnya content creator. But actually I'm still a businessman. Jadi saya lihat justru sangat optimis sekali yang namanya human capital tadi. Dari mulai AI engineer, digital engineer, medical. Coba ketemu nggak teman-teman dokter nih, dokter umum ya, yang pada pengangguran. Bingung loh Pak, ternyata ada. Kenapa? Karena mereka milih nggak kerja. Kalau kerja di UGD, kerjanya bisa 2 hari nggak tidur. Karena kekurangan dokter. Akhirnya mereka lebih milih kerja jadi broker agent property. Beberapa sekarang jadi beauty clinic, buka masih mendingan lah gitu. Nah, sedangkan kita pemerintah kan ngebatasin tuh untuk sekolah kedokteran. Jadi saya lihat kalau di sana kita bisa kencengin bahasa Inggris kencengin, kita bisa saingin Filipina untuk ekspornya bukan cuma tenaga kerja murah, tapi bahkan lebih yang intelek punya gitu. Jadi saya dari sektor industri bisnis saya ngeliat justru ke depan optimis banget gitu karena aset terbesar Indonesia itu adalah di human capital sebetulnya dibanding natural resources-nya. Thank you.
Baik, anybody wants to? I think it's a very valid point ya, bahwa ada menurut saya ada 3 potensi Indonesia. Tadi kan ngomong manufacturing, yang juga menambah nilai, yaitu bisnis berbasis IP. That falls into creative economy. Jadi satu creative economy ini satu pilar sendiri, ada 17 subsektor. Jadi kalau kita ngomong manufacturing, itu juga ada yang komponen yang dari, ini nggak semuanya masuk di services sectors. Semuanya masuk juga di penambahan nilai. Yang kedua pilarnya itu green economy. Sebetulnya Archipelago Indonesia ini juga enterprising archipelago ini mendorong Indonesia ini epicentrumnya green economy loh. Kita punya biodiversity terbanyak, kita punya, dan ini bisa jadi duit sekarang dengan carbon development projects. I'm sure you are part of few. Itu kunci. And it's going to be a big economy. Jadi green economy, new economy which is creative economy, dan saya melihat juga beberapa hal yang saya soroti tadi mengenai health and education juga akan play a very significant role. Untuk kebersamaannya saya ucapkan terima kasih. Sekali lagi saya mengingatkan kita harus optimis bahwa Indonesia bisa mencapai Indonesia Emas 2045 dan kunci utamanya adalah bagaimana kita bersatu, berkolaborasi dan tetap meningkatkan productivity. Terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.